It's funny, there's this conversation I've been having with a few of my friends lately that's also coming up in like the zeitgeist of the midlife community. And it's around friendships and how they change dramatically as you get older. And at first, I didn't think this was a getting older thing. I thought it might have even been like a post-COVID thing, but it feels like, how do I describe this? Your tolerance for people that don't match your vibe, for lack of a better word, really drops somewhere after 50. And I've noticed that both in myself and other friends have been talking about it as well. Just the nature of how certain friendships can just fall off or fade away after a long period of time being each other's worlds. And it's not that you have like a big argument or a fallout. It's more of like a slow unraveling where you have less and less to share with one another, or you're trying to avoid certain topics because there's areas where you just don't align anymore. And those relationships come at a cost, because even though you may still love that person, you've got a lot of time invested in them and in the relationship, if you feel like you have to censor yourself or amp yourself up in some way to be in the presence of that other person, it can become very exhausting. So, like I said, I've been having these conversations with different friends of mine who have moved away from certain friendships, and I've had that myself, and it never feels good, but very rarely does it not feel like it needed to happen. Like you kind of knew the writing was on the wall and it was just a matter of time. But it's not just my friends and I who are talking about this. It seems to be like a new genre on YouTube of folks who are sharing their lives and perspectives as someone who doesn't have any friends or family and is completely isolated. And this is just a lifestyle that they've chosen for themselves and they feel compelled to share it. And surprisingly or not, these genres actually perform really well, because I think that a lot of people, especially as they get older, feel their social world starting to close in a little bit. And I feel it too. And while I'm comfortable with where it is right now, my biggest fear is what that might look like over time and at a catastrophic level. Like, do I turn into a recluse and a hoarder and, someone who doesn't leave their house and the police has to do wellness checks? I don't think that that would be who I would become, but also I'm a girl who loves being home. So I don't know, maybe that could happen. But I do find that whether it's because of social media or that we're all coming out of the other end of COVID feeling a little bit more resilient to being in our own space and not talking to people for days or weeks or months on end, that we've become a lot more accustomed to spending time on our own. And the other thing that we hear in the news and, the Surgeon General and everybody says that the biggest marker of longevity is having connections. But the problem is that we've built a world for ourselves that almost works in opposition to creating connection, which usually happens when you see people at random intervals, right? Like you become friends of proximity and then hopefully deepen a friendship from that point on. But when you do most of your shopping on Amazon and you get your groceries delivered and, there's just very few reasons to leave the house, it makes it harder to come across folks just in everyday life. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately since moving. And where I lived in Austin, I didn't have a lot of friends because COVID happened 6 months after we moved there. And then by the time we got out of COVID, I had already in my mind knew that I was going to be moving west again as soon as I could. So the effort to make friends wasn't there. So I did leave Austin with one friend, shout out to my friend Kanisha. But beyond that, I really just didn't make the effort to have community there because in my mind, it wasn't a long-term thing. Coming back to California, I'm moving back towards friends that I've had for a long time. I have a baked-in community here, which feels really good, but my appetite for leaving the house hasn't really changed that much. I do love being in my house with my sweatpants, with my dog on the couch, scrolling Instagram. I have to say that is a very regulating way for me to spend time. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. But anyway, I'm curious to know, for those of you who are in midlife and maybe edging on retirement, do you feel like you have a lot of friends? Do you feel like you have enough social engagement? Because I'll tell you something, if you feel that way because right now you're working and you're around a lot of people all day, that is going to feel dramatically different when you are not around people all day and you have to intentionally put pants on, leave the house to be around other people. It is a very, very different experience, to be sure. But anyway, coming back to this idea of a shrinking social world in midlife. I wanted to see if there was any research on it or if this was just something that was, trending in my own universe. And it turns out that there is some substantial evidence to support this idea of retracting socially as you get past the age of 50. What is it called? It's called what is it called again? I forgot. Socio-emotional selectivity. It's called socio-emotional selectivity. I will put the name of the Stanford researcher that came up with this term below. But the idea is that as we enter our predominantly 50s, we start to have a different relationship with time. And we realize that our time on this planet is not infinite. And as a result of that, we want to invest our energy and our time into the relationships that have the most meaning for us. And as a result of that, because there's only so many hours in a day, a lot of our peripheral relationships fall away. And while I can see that being definitely true, I would say for me, it's a little bit different. It has less to do with a reckoning of time, even though I do have that. I feel for me, it's more of a reckoning of energy and tolerance. So the energy part, which is probably the bigger piece of this, is that I have a social battery that's about this big rather than an extrovert who might have a social battery that's this big. So mine just drains a lot sooner. And I found some other research that was really interesting that all of us, even extroverts, have about a 3-hour window of being social before we have to retreat and recharge our social batteries, which is so true for me. I'm at about a 2.5-hour social battery, but 3 hours is definitely my limit. At that point, I definitely need to go be in a room by myself. But it's nice to know that even extroverts have this 3-hour capacity and it's not just me. And then of course, for me personally, the other big piece of this is just general tolerance. And when I say tolerance, I don't mean that in I'm not going to tolerate this behavior anymore kind of way. I mean more of a quieter tolerance of how does this interaction make me feel when I leave it? Or how does my nervous system feel when I see this person's name pop up on my phone? And I started to notice where certain interactions can drain me and certain interactions make me feel a lot more energized. I went hiking with a girlfriend this morning and we had great conversation. Those two things combined are my favorite way of getting energized. Something like being in a loud restaurant where I'm really struggling to hear the person I'm talking to, that completely drains my energy. So it's not always about the person. Sometimes it's the environment and the context and what we're doing. And sometimes it is the person. And it's not necessarily that they are always draining me, but we may just have 1 or 2 interactions where it doesn't feel as fun or as cohesive, whatever the case may be, right? That tolerance for draining experiences for me has dramatically dropped since I hit my 50s, even maybe my later 40s. And I don't know if that's true of all people, but I've just found that my tolerance has become so much more sensitive for draining conversations or people and environments. It definitely in my 50s, maybe even starting in my late 40s, to the point where it does make me feel a lot more selective of how I spend my time and where I spend my time. So that is something that has felt very real for me. And it's interesting for me because now I'm in this place where I have a lot more local friends, but my desire for going out and being social hasn't really increased that much since it was in Austin. So who knows what that means. So herein lies a problem for a natural, happy introvert who just loves being at home. How do we protect ourselves against this looming fear of complete social isolation in a world that is, particularly here in North America, designing us to be more and more isolated? There's fewer third places. Yes, we can meet people at work, but relying on work for your social engagement is a very tricky thing because once that job goes away, all of your social life goes with it. And we also hear that online relationships are not a fair comparison to in real life ones. And I don't know, I would actually push back on that. I've had some really enriching and beautiful online relationships. I don't know, maybe that is unhealthy, but they were certainly satisfying for me. Personally, I feel like online interactions, as long as it's not parasocial, it is actually a genuine connection of one-on-one. For example, you watching me here on this video, I appreciate it, but that doesn't build a relationship, right? Like you actually had to be having one-on-one connections with people online. By the way, I'm going to unpack this topic a little bit more in detail on my Substack. So I will leave a link to that below. Yes, I am now on Substack and I am freaking loving it. I will say it's concerning for future generations who may never have the opportunity to build a lot of in-person relationships and may look at online relationships as sort of the default, and how that's going to change, social interaction going forward. But I can only kind of worry about the space that I'm in and trying to do the best that I can. So with that said, I'm really curious how you guys feel on this topic. Do you feel like as you get older, your social circle gets smaller? And if it gets smaller, is it becoming more meaningful, or is it just becoming smaller? I'd love to hear how you are sustaining your relationships, how you're building new ones, and have you built really meaningful relationships after the age of 50? I think that's a hard thing to do, but I don't think it's impossible. And it's something I want to spend more time and energy doing. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'll see you next time.